dark. Red and blue views, truth in the middle. No script, just thought raw and a little civil. Every question's got layers, so we peel back facts. From the real to the surreal, we don't hold back. Voices collide where ideas ignite. You tuned in, now step into the fight. This is more than talk, this is thought that counts. Welcome to the feed where the signal mounts.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're diving into a transcript from a live online panel. This isn't exactly a calm, moderated discussion.
No, definitely not. It's more like a space where people, come together, they share really unfiltered thoughts. Sometimes they clash quite a bit.
And sometimes, apparently, they connect in ways you really wouldn't expect.
Exactly. Our source today is called Alliances They Never Saw Coming, and it's from the YouTube channel OTW Live. It gives us this raw look inside the dynamics of a particular online community.
Right. And our mission here for this deep dive isn't just to sort of list what happened.
Right.
We want to pull out the important bits, the insights.
Help you understand the dynamics underneath, the ideas floating around, and maybe what these moments tell us about online communities and the people in them.
Think of it like we're navigating this lively, sometimes kind of chaotic digital space together. We're spotting the key things, the surprising details, amidst all the noise.
Sounds good. So where do we start setting the stage?
Yeah, let's set the stage. The source kicks off with one main figure making a pretty big declaration. They say they've adopted Chalkboards ways. What did that seem to mean there?
Well, based on the source, it sounds like a focus on peace and actively trying to get rid of corruption in their little world, with this goal of being stronger together. It's presented as a real shift for them.
And right alongside that, there's this declared new alliance with Mr. Talcott. And the source mentions this alliance comes with some, pretty unusual privileges, almost metaphorical, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Things like diplomatic immunity and even phrases like holy free head choppings and free beatings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it paints a picture, doesn't it? It suggests some kind of perceived authority or maybe protection within whatever rules that community has. Sounds pretty unconventional to an outsider, obviously.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, where that title, Alliances They Never Saw Coming, starts to click. Almost right away, the source points out another declaration happening at the same time, a metversal holy war.
Right, but the twist is this war isn't by the New Alliance people. It's declared against Talkatya, as they call it, by someone else, Ilumitami.
So this other figure is declaring war on them.
Exactly. The source even mentions a clip description that says this war is announced and Talkatya is going to burn. Pretty intense.
Yikes. And how do the people in the panel, the ones in this new alliance, react?
Well, what's fascinating is how they position themselves. Despite this, external declaration of war against them, they actually state their intention is to be pacifists in the whole thing.
So, okay, you've got this new peace-focused alliance forming, getting these weird perks, but they're immediately facing a declared holy war while trying to be pacifists.
Adds a layer of complexity, right. And then there's another layer. The source mentions internal problems, too. Some people associated with them, called mods, are apparently unhappy.
Unhappy with the new alliance.
Yeah, or maybe even hostile towards some members of this new Talcott alliance. Just highlights how, volatile these online group things can be.
It sounds incredibly messy.
And the source gives a little background. It mentions past collaborations between these same people, like working together for 2 years, or one person having broadcast keys for a long time.
Ah, so there's history there.
Exactly. It gives context. These relationships aren't fixed. Alliances shift. People value their independence. It's this constant negotiation you see in these online spaces.
Okay, so that's the big picture, the alliances and external wars. Let's maybe zoom in now, look at the micro-level stuff, the conflicts happening within the panel itself.
Yeah, the source is almost like a case study in those real-time interaction challenges. You see the friction points straight away.
Like what?
Well, they bring up past issues. For example, one panelist talks about problems with someone who allegedly threatened a family member.
Oh, wow. Heavy stuff.
Yeah, and the panelist describes trying to help that person, which then kicks off this whole other discussion in the group about unsolicited help.
The complexities of trying to intervene online.
Exactly. And it broadens out into this challenge of managing access in these spaces when, as they put it, crazy people can have unfiltered access to the internet. That's a direct quote from the source material.
That really gets at the heart of moderating open forums, doesn't
Yeah.
it? The difficulty of boundaries.
Totally. And you see another dynamic, too. People deciding who they'll even listen to based on alignment. One panelist says they find it hard to engage with someone specific, a guy named Paul,
Why?
because they say they don't share the same faith covenant.
A faith covenant, okay.
Yeah. And what's interesting is another panelist jumps in and says they totally get that based on their own experience.
So for some people, it's not just preference, it's like a prerequisite for even talking or trusting.
It seems that way, yeah. It's presented as a necessary condition for, like, meaningful communication for them.
And even while they're talking about wanting to get past small conflicts.
Right. You get this live example right there in the source of how hard it is. Two panelists just cannot seem to have a discussion without constantly interrupting each other.
Even while talking about ending micro-conflicts.
Exactly. It's such a human moment,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Shows that gap between wanting to do something and actually doing it in the heat of the moment. Very relatable in a way.
So that difficulty in just talking smoothly, where does that lead the conversation?
Well, it kind of flows into this really fascinating, though kind of dark discussion about what fun even means in these online interactions.
Fun. How so?
The focus shifts to the idea of, like, tearing people down just for amusement.
Oof. Yeah, that happens online.
And the source really explores that. It links it to descriptions of people feeling dead inside or acting like the devil inside, basically getting energy or enjoyment from other people's negative reactions or pain.
That's a pretty bleak view of why some people are antagonistic online, finding pleasure in distress.
It is. But then it's contrasted slightly. The idea of the trickster archetype comes up.
A trick.
Yeah. In relation to one panelist they call Moose, the description in the source suggests Moose plays jokes or causes disruption, also for amusement, but supposedly with a different goal.
Which is?
To bring about a consciousness, apparently, or challenge norms. It's presented as an attempt to differentiate that kind of disruption from just, like, malicious tearing down.
So disruption as potentially constructive versus purely destructive. Interesting distinction, though maybe a blurry line in practice.
Could be. It shows there are different ways these things are perceived within that group, you know? Sometimes harmful, sometimes maybe provocative in a different way.
Okay, moving on a bit. Another thing running through the source seems to be people trying to figure themselves out, right? Understand their place.
Yeah, definitely. And they use some pretty unconventional methods for that self-discovery, sometimes very revealing ones.
Like what kind of methods?
Well, they talk about intelligence tests, IQ tests.
Okay. Standard enough, maybe.
Sort of. The conversation touches on what those tests are supposed to measure. You know, visual perception, abstract reasoning, patterns, spatial stuff, analytical thinking.
The usual suspects for IQ.
Right. But then they get into these practical questions, like how would you even test someone who can't read? Or they debate whether something like ESP is relevant.
Huh. Okay, maybe less standard then. ESP and IQ tests.
Yeah, it goes off on tangents. They also get into the Myers-Briggs personality test.
Ah, the MBTI. Lots of people take that.
Exactly. Several people on the panel mention they've taken it. They talk about their types, INTJ, INTP, ENFJ are mentioned.
And do they find it useful?
They seem to reflect on how the results might give them some insight, you know, into how their minds work or why they interact with people or the world in certain ways.
Makes sense. Trying to understand yourself through these frameworks.
And you even see one panelist taking the test live, right there during the broadcast. They describe their thought process answering the questions. It's like a little window into that self-categorization attempt.
Okay, that's interesting. But you said some methods were really revealing.
Oh, yeah. That definitely applies to the next one. A huge chunk of the source discussion was about something called the rice purity test.
The rice purity test. What is that? Never heard of it.
Me neither before this. It's described in the source as something that supposedly measures purity. Mostly seems tied to past actions, particularly in relationships or sexual experiences.
Okay, purity. That sounds potentially problematic.
Well, one panelist even linked it sort of metaphorically to these ancient ideas about the lightness of your soul. But yeah, the focus was definitely on actions.
And did they share their scores?
They did. The scores mentioned ranged quite a bit, from lows like 11 or 12 up to 29.
Out of how many do we know?
The source implies it's out of 100, as is standard for that test, making those scores very low. And the interpretation on the panel seemed to be that lower scores meant, well, less purity, or as they put it, more degeneracy.
Degeneracy. Wow, strong word.
Yeah, and they really didn't hold back sharing the details behind those scores. They talked openly about specific questions from the test and admitted experiences.
Like what kind of experiences are we talking? Basic stuff?
Some basic, sure. Kissing, masturbation. But then it went much further. Public sex, car sex, having sex while parents were in the house.
Okay, getting more specific.
Threesomes, orgies, filming sex acts, period sex, anal sex. Even having STDs. It was a remarkably candid list.
That is very open, especially for a live panel.
Extremely. But the most striking part, the one that took up a lot of discussion and debate, was a detailed admission from one panelist about what they described as incest.
Incest. Seriously.
Yeah. Yes. With the specific relation mentioned was a second cousin twice removed.
Okay. Wow. Did they give context?
The panelists provided context, yeah. They said it happened when they were heavily under the influence of drugs, and they claimed they didn't actually know the person was their cousin at the time of the encounter.
Right. And how did the others react to that admission?
It definitely sparked a big reaction, lots of debate among the panelists, about the act itself, obviously, but also about how it should count towards the purity score.
I can imagine. That's an incredibly raw thing to share publicly. It must have shifted the dynamic.
It seemed to. It revealed a lot about the boundaries, or maybe the lack of them in that forum, and just how the group tried to process such a heavy disclosure together live.
And what about their reactions to the scores generally? The numbers themselves?
Also noteworthy, people use terms like degenerate about themselves or others based on the low scores. There were moments of genuine surprise, maybe disbelief, at just how low some numbers were.
So even in this kind of wild, unconventional setting, the tests seemed to carry some weight for them as a way to judge themselves or others.
It appeared to, yeah. It clearly prompted a lot of reflection and reaction.
Any other self-discovery tools mentioned?
Briefly, yeah. They touched on astrology and birth charts.
Ah, another popular one.
Right. There was interest expressed and a sort of feeling that it could be accurate for understanding yourself or relationships. But they also admitted they didn't really have a technical understanding of it.
So more of a general interest in systems that might explain personality or destiny.
Seems like it. Just another tool they were exploring for self-understanding.
Okay, so beyond these specific tests or systems, the source sounds like it was just generally full of strong opinions and raw moments.
Oh, absolutely. Just full of highly opinionated takes, philosophical bits, and just unfiltered personal sharing.
Like what else stood out?
Well, there was a moment where someone recited a poem, or maybe it was more of a rant, called Pills for Profit.
Pills for Profit, about
the pharmaceutical industry, basically. Yeah. It was presented as this core message, very critical of big pharma, reflected a specific viewpoint present on the panel.
Got it. A bit of social commentary mixed in.
Yeah. And then you had one panelist in particular who just shared these incredibly personal, sometimes really shocking anecdotes, things that seemed to come out of nowhere.
Shocking how?
Like overcoming heroin addiction following a suicide attempt that was linked to becoming a father. Really heavy personal history.
Wow. Shared just like that?
Yeah, shared alongside their views on other topics like sex magic.
Sex magic. Okay, what do they mean by that?
They described it as something spiritual, requiring an emotional connection beforehand, though confusingly, they also mentioned religious orgies in a different context, so a bit contradictory maybe.
Definitely sounds complex. What else?
Even stuff about unconventional food sources, like casually mentioning eating roadkill wild turkey.
Okay, roadkill. So a real mix of the profound, the spiritual, the taboo, and the extremely practical, all from one person.
Exactly. These different elements just combine to create this really complex, maybe contradictory online persona. You get bits and pieces.
Anything else on the interaction front? Specific exchanges?
Yeah, there were these specific, apparently repeated moments where one panelist kept trying to proposition another one for sex.
Seriously? On the live panel?
Yeah. Using really colorful, kind of offbeat language, too. Mentioning a seedy hotel or a taco headboard bed. Very specific imagery.
And how did the other person respond?
The source makes a point of highlighting that the other panelists consistently and directly rejected these advances.
Okay. So even in that unfiltered space, boundaries were being tested, but also, importantly, maintained in that instance.
Right. It shows that dynamic playing out clearly.
Any other standout comments or moments?
There was one brief, kind of jarring comment that seemed unexplained. Someone referred to Islam as a go-between, or maybe a broom that was sweeping away Christians.
Wow, okay. That sounds Loaded. Was there context?
Not provided in the source material we have, it's just presented as a statement made during the conversation. Very abrupt.
Okay. And one last thing. Something about food pictures.
Oh, yeah. Almost forgot. In a totally different, almost random interlude, one panelist starts showing pictures of different kinds of fish and meat they had.
Fish and meat.
But
Why?
Just talking about food quality, how to prepare it. It was this little slice of life moment, totally contrasting with the heavy personal stuff or the big alliance drama.
A little peek behind the curtain at everyday interests, maybe?
Exactly. Just another unexpected turn in the conversation.
So, quite a journey through that source material.
And there you have it. That's our deep dive into this particular corner of the online world, where you see these grand alliances declared, immediately met with war declarations.
Where personal conflicts play out right in front of everyone, and where people are trying to figure themselves out using, well, some really unconventional and incredibly revealing methods.
Yeah, from discussing metversal holy wars and claims of diplomatic immunity, all the way down to the raw, specific details shared during that purity test.
And philosophical debates about things like sex magic. It really gives you this unique, unfiltered glimpse into the personalities and the dynamics driving that specific group.
It definitely leaves you with a lot to think about, doesn't it? About identity and vulnerability, conflict, connection, all playing out in these very raw digital spaces.
Absolutely. What does it tell you about that human desire for maybe belonging or recognition or even just pure expression when the digital stage lets people share with such raw honesty, including sometimes really shocking details aired so publicly?
It's definitely something to mull over, isn't it? As you think about the many, many layers of online interaction in your own experience, what drives people to share and how do these digital spaces shape that sharing?
One spark, from the shadows to the bright, let's light the dark. Red and blue views, truth in the middle, no script, just thought raw and a little civil. Every question's got layers, so we peel back facts. From the real to the surreal, we don't hold back. Voices collide where ideas ignite. You tuned in, now step into